Anyway, so Ryan was just asking about Paymaya. Um, was your question just what we thought of Paymaya and how they're integrating crypto, or was it something more
Yeah,
specific?
well, they're called Maya Bank now, so they've left the old Paymaya name, and they have a crypto function inside the app where you can just directly buy whatever crypto you know how to search the name for, and it's like saved there. So, for example, yung 1,200 pesos ko, it's now 1,300 in Cardano. And I know some people who've put like 50K in that function inside Paymaya. And for me, Maya Bank is kind of mainstream, di ba? They're BSP like accredited, and people are putting money in. You have billboards, so they're mainstreaming crypto. So what do you think about that? Is that a good way to go, or do you think there's something yun nga, parang may duping factor involved, di ba? If it's a business, what do you think is going on there?
You have any opinion?
um, well, yeah, I do. And I think it's fine to start with, right? Um, like, there are a lot of people who are concerned, and rightfully so, that they're going to lose their keys. I'm sure you've heard about that already, like what keys are. Um, it's kind of like your password to your crypto. You can think of it that way. Um, and so they go through things like Maya or Grayscale Bitcoin Trust. You know, they go through custodians so that to get exposure to crypto. Um, and that's fine. I mean, it really depends what you need it for, right? Like if you're doing it just as an investor, then yeah. Yeah. Although I think like that's just 10% of what's exciting about the space. There's just so much more that's happening if you buy or that investors don't see typically.
Yeah, I actually am not 100% familiar with Maya's like crypto products or like what they're offering. Um, so I can't speak so much
I can explain.
specifically. Okay, please.
You can just buy and sell, but you cannot withdraw or receive.
Okay, okay. So you can buy and sell. So it's on their account, and you're trading these basically paper crypto. Um, but you can't actually withdraw it. So you can't send it anywhere outside of the PayMaya app. My goodness. All right. Well, yeah. So let me tie this into our supposedly discussion tonight, which is on Michael Saylor's episode, and he describes this like four layer sort of 4 layer level of Bitcoin, and it's similar to, I guess, how the internet protocol is also could be thought of the same thing in how there is like the first layer internet, which is, well, I'm not that technical, so I can't describe it particularly well, but the first layer would be what like the government, the US Navy or their US militaries like first iteration of the internet protocol, and then you would have layer 2, which and then layer 3, and then up to like HTTP, which is supposed to be layer 4 or something like this. And so the idea is that, when it comes to this kind of technology, especially for example with Bitcoin, you're building out from the base layer, which would be Bitcoin. You're building out secondary, third, then from the secondary layer, you're building out third layers, and then from that third layers, you're building fourth layers. Oh, hey, Kidlat, welcome. So, um, for Bitcoin, let me just repeat what Sailor is saying here, just so we're on the same page. So, Bitcoin would be the layer 1, which is a settlement layer, and it has two roles. The first role is to move large sums of money through space with security, and the second role is that money has to last forever, or you're moving that money through time. The layer two would be non-custodial, but still moving, but instead moving small size with high frequency. So, hey, what's up, Jerry? An example would be the Lightning Network, which can move a lot of transactions a day per day. If Bitcoin can move 350,000 transactions per day, Lightning can move 350 million transactions per day. So that's layer two. Then you have layer three, and we're moving now from non-custodial to custodial, which means when you say non-custodial, it means you don't need to trust another party to hold your Bitcoin. Layer three, which is custodial, means you're trusting someone else to hold your Bitcoin, and this will be used or is useful for moving Bitcoin for free. So, for example, you would keep your Bitcoin at a bank, and then the bank will allow you to transfer monetary value basically for free as a service. And then finally is layer four, which is where I think Maya would fall under, because at first glance you think it's a layer three. You're trusting the bank to hold it for you, but layer four is an app or a product where you cannot withdraw or you cannot withdraw or remove the Bitcoin from the product. So he gave an example, which is Grayscale's GBTC. So Grayscale is an American company or mutual fund, you could say, that only holds Bitcoin, and so its value is the Bitcoin that's on it, and you're trading basically paper Bitcoin, kind of like with Maya. Anyway, um, yeah, I have no particular. Oh yeah, so I do have a question for this, and this is open to anybody, which is, do you think there is any monopolization pressure on the layer three or layer four level? Because we're talking about like private companies basically that are going to be competing with one another on uh, these services supposedly, and of course those services, it's competing, it wants to be more and more efficient, and so you have this pressure of centralization and monopolization, where one company is able to basically get the broad share of the market in whatever region it's operating in. So what is your opinion on that? Do you think that these pressures exist, and if they don't, why not?
Yeah, I don't think they exist currently, right? Like layer one is still cheap enough to transact. I mean, the experience isn't great, especially if you're making payments. You don't want to wait 10, maybe sometimes 15 to 20 minutes for something to go through. Layer two, which is Lightning, right? And please correct me if I'm mistaken. Layer two, and it's not just Lightning, there are other layer twos, right? Although Saylor's definitions might be a bit different from what I've heard elsewhere, but let's say it's just Lightning. It's getting pretty good already, right? Like even just a year ago, the experience was much worse than it is today. And you can move things for free, pretty much. I mean, sometimes there are fees, but they tend to be small. And so that means that even if banks, which are layer three, move it for free, like how much are you gonna save? Like pesos only. So there isn't a lot of pressure, at least now. I mean, but in a high fee environment, some of that can leak to Lightning as well. So yeah, it's possible. It's possible that there will be pressure in high fee environment for people to move to banks. But then again, you start losing everything that makes Bitcoin, er, you know, for me, the main selling point about Bitcoin is that it's permissionless.
Anybody else have an opinion on this? So In other words, what you're saying is because Lightning and even the base layer is good enough for using it peer to peer, the clients or the users have the option of stepping away from the banks and not even using their services. And it's different from today's environment where we have no choice, especially if you want to do digital transactions, we have no choice but to do it through the banks, right? Because otherwise the technology doesn't exist to do it otherwise. Now with Bitcoin, especially through, for example, cheaper layer twos like the Lightning Network, we can sort of vote with our feet and vote with our mobility and move from not just from one service to another service. We can actually plug out from any service altogether and just self custody and self transact amongst one another. So it flips the dynamic from the banks being predatory and wanting to keep us within the system and trying to extract value from us. It flips that dynamic so that now we are the ones with power and the banks have to cater to our needs and provide I guess services that we want, because otherwise we don't need them at all, supposedly, in this new system.
I mean, yeah, kind of, right? But I did say, like I did say with the current fee environment, because when it's super high, like it becomes very difficult to tell what's gonna happen. Like, you start also, it starts to become a bit more difficult to keep your Lightning. Well, I'll just keep it simple then. It starts to become difficult to keep the Lightning network running smoothly when fees are very high. So, some of that is going to start leaking. Some of the fees are going to start leaking into the Lightning network. The Lightning network might start becoming a bit more expensive as well. But, but I think using the banks and the way they do it now, like Swift, I mean, that kind of sucks, man. I mean, I can definitely imagine something way better that comes out of the Bitcoin or crypto ecosystem to just replace that. So take, for example, Chaumian mints, right? So this thing's called Fedimint. It's kind of like a bank still, where when you create a mint, you still custody other people's Bitcoin, for example. But really, you can issue any kind of token in there. But there are some cryptographic assurances that users have, and that you also as an operator have, right? I mean, I can certainly imagine banks beginning to adopt something like that if this whole crypto thing becomes popular enough, right? Which I think it will. I think banks are gonna have to eventually adopt it, and they're gonna, like you said, offer services that only centralized institutions can offer, and people will avail of those services because they find value in it.
By the way, guys, we also have a chat going on Discord. So if you're on Discord, it's on the top right. It says show chat. If you click on that, you can see. And I'm going to tag everyone so you can see a red sort of notification. Anyway, yeah. So Lightning, yeah. So just full disclosure, I guess, Lightning is not gonna be almost cheap, almost free forever, and at some point its costs will start to increase. But hopefully there will be increasing solutions that can like provide this, like, I guess that same peer to peer at cheaper and cheaper price. Like, could there be a Lightning layer 2.2?
Yeah. I mean, like they are talking about like layer threes and stuff on Lightning already, but but it's not like I mean, in some ways, it is like Inception, the movie, where the deeper you go in the dream, it's like the more time. It's like the more, I don't know, the longer time is in the dream and the shorter it is in the real world. I mean, it's not exactly like that when it comes to scaling on like what people typically call layer threes and I don't know layer fours. Um, but I'm like you had a question here. Will Lightning get more expensive than 2.5% per transaction? I doubt it. I mean, again, it's hard to tell the future, but I doubt it because we're gonna start to see other ways to transact and to move around value, and those are gonna mean, and that's gonna be stuff like Fedi mints or Chaumian mints or Cashew or heck Maya or banks too, right? Like all of the activity there will relieve the pressure in the lower levels.
Yep.
Yeah.
Hey guys.
Hey,
Yeah.
what's up, Jerry?
Yeah. I This is a great topic. I think what Bitcoin gives to us is the choices, right? For us to deal at different layers. If let's say Bitcoin on chain is let's say the base layer, whereas the current or traditional banking or payment rail, they do not give us much choices. It's just different company operating on the same protocol, right? And second thing is Bitcoin to me is the probably biggest monetary education campaign on earth that's happening now. That it it wakes us up, like all of us learn what money is, and we also getting very careful with our privacy and things that we learn together with the Bitcoin, and also what we learn here help us to make better choices. Right? Especially there are choices there. So we learn how to make better choices. And if you think about level, let's say if Lightning is level two, level threes, there are plenty of level threes already happening, right? While they are not banks yet, things like Lightning Bits, Stripes, you know, or even if you think about operating on I don't know those with Lightning address, like for example, from one Fountain user to send to another Fountain user. That itself is an entry on the okay, probably it's not an entry on the database, but that is also a Lightning transaction. I I think things those services is already centralized, and we as a user choose whatever services that we happy with. I I remember that there is one, I can't remember which one is that I used for a while, and I feel like okay, this is better than the other services that I've been using. Now I choose to ditch it and then I continue with what I was using. For example, ZBD. I think ZBD now recently they have this new so-called rules that I think at most you can send, oh sorry, at most you accumulated we can receive or send 300,000 sats for ZBD account. And if more than that, you need to register account, meaning it's a KYC software already. So immediately we like, although I got a very cool ZBD, yeah, thanks, ZBD address, really cool. Donald Trump at zbd.gg. You send that to Donald Trump, you get to me, right? Really cool. But I'm not gonna use that, you see. So so I think it's really about choices, and we have different choices at different layers. That is very crucial. And there are places that there are times that you don't mind to put, I don't know, few hundreds of your money or my money or USD on certain services, right? For convenience sake. But yeah,
Yeah, that's
I
right.
just
I mean,
sorry, I was just kidding. Not really Donald Trump. Okay, it's Biden.
fine. Yeah, I agree, and that's why, like, you also get other benefits from using centralized or custodians. Like, for example, Wallet of Satoshi is a centralized Lightning wallet, meaning that Lightning isn't held by your private key or anything. It's held by someone else, and it's in their database. And it's all about knowing what risk you're taking when you use the service, right?
Yes.
They can run away with your Bitcoin. So I wouldn't put more than, I don't know, like $20 worth of Bitcoin or something like that in there. But it is an excellent way to to
To
let
onboard
people
people.
see the magic of Lightning too.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I typically recommend that people at least see it there, but then I explain what the trade-offs are and that there are other wallets that where you can control the keys yourself.
All right. Okay, so let's move on a bit from the lightning talk. Um, After this whole layer thing discussion, he brought up something that is I just marked here. I thought it was quite interesting. Um, Maybe it's something that doesn't really need discussion because it's kind of self-apparent in my opinion, but and so we can skip this if nobody has any like particular thing to say. But I thought I'd just bring it up. So um, he makes this comparison. So Lex asks, whether it's immoral or like illegal to sort of break out of your system, because currently, for example, all of our financial systems are actually like fragmented and we each have our own little world where like in the Philippines we have Gcash, Paymaya. In China there's like Alipay. In Malaysia, I'm not sure what your app is, but I'm sure you have your own sort of like financial apps. And so we each have our own fragmented worlds, and we have to rely on other parties to do the transaction between those worlds. And so, is breaking out of that system, is it inherently immoral or or illegal? And then Saylor responds by giving this metaphor, and he says, when we break out of when we break out of the constraints of our own culture, usually we do that through learning English, which is like an international language. And through learning English, we're able to expose ourselves to other cultures, other ideas, and even express our own culture to other people. And of course, nobody would say it's illegal to learn English, right? Nobody would say it's immoral to learn English. Is learning, for example, Bitcoin something like learning English, or do you think it's immoral or illegal to break out of our system?
Interesting. I don't recall this this part of the discussion, but I find it like a strange question because like all, all the fiat money we use is like the form that we have it today is, I don't know, it's less than like 100 years old, right? um and and also, like, yeah, Steph is right, illegal in the eyes of the government. Yeah, they make the rules, but also not everything the government does is moral, or not everything that's legal is moral, ethical, and not everything that's illegal is unethical or immoral either, right? Like I think those are two different things. So I mean, I guess that my short answer is like certainly not. Well, it's not immoral to do so. It might be illegal, right? Like there's certainly countries that have said no, you cannot use Bitcoin. Um, well, it's a good thing that Bitcoin doesn't care.
Okay, thank you, Ryan. Uh, Ramon. So, anybody else? Otherwise, we'll move on to another question. Okay, so we're on the topic of sort of morality and what is right, what is good, what is right, what is not right, what is ethical or not. And Michael Saylor is notorious for his stance on promoting property, digital property, which he considers Bitcoin to be, versus promoting securities and I guess other financial instruments, which he considers to be a having a conflict of interest. So um why is it that we are able to? Oh, well, I guess first of all, is it a conflict of interest to promote Bitcoin, which is something that most of us own? And if it's not a conflict of interest, why not? And what makes it? What would make it a conflict of interest?
I'll go first. Simple muna.
Okay.
Yeah, as far as I can see, it's not yet a really big conflict of interest. I mean, in fact, crypto coin holders have had the sour end of things, diba? The price has gone up, it's gone down. People who bought when it was high, and it's low, and for the remaining normal people, they're still sort of having the last laugh. Of course, they're only looking for like the proof in the pudding, which is if are you gonna make a fortune or ikaw, diba? As opposed to the others you've heard in the States probably who now drive luxury cars. So right now, it's more like really invitational, and it's the bird of. I mean, the normal people still would still place the burden of proof on the crypto purveyor. So right now, it's not really a conflict of interest, but it's more like based on the principles of cryptocurrency. You're just trying to do them a favor. If they're not listening, then that's their freedom to not do it, diba? That's what I see about it.
Okay, thanks, Ryan.
Yeah, I was like agreeing with Sailor when he was saying, it's not unethical, for example, to tell people, hey, yeah, you should have extra food or whatever, like a horse and a farm, right? That I was nodding there, and then also his example of like if you control or have some meaningful control over the issuance of a token, and then you start telling people, yeah, you should buy that. I was agreeing there too. And then Alex said, but like you would benefit too from people buying Bitcoin, right? Because you do own a, not just a small part, like a fairly large part. And it seemed like even Michael like kind of agreed there. He's like, okay, yeah, I'll give you that, or something like that, to that effect, right? So it seems to me that it's a matter of degree. Like if I own, I don't know, let's just exaggerate to make a point, right? Like 50% of all the Bitcoin. Yeah, it kind of sounds like there would be a conflict of interest if I go around and tell people to buy it. But certainly more so if I also control the issuance and the consensus rules, and all the other stuff, right? Where to draw the line, I don't know. All I know is all I can be. Well, all I know for sure is I haven't passed that line. You know what I mean? It's like I obviously don't own nearly anything close to what Sailor has. Basically zero influence on the consensus and the issuance of tokens. And yeah, like that's why I see it like a commodity and not a security.
All right. So Steph brought up something interesting. So you said that there is this line that you draw in the sand, and for you at least, you're behind that line. And for Steph, she draws a line between promoting Bitcoin. So just I guess telling people the facts, what are the truth about this thing, and the other side of that line being telling people what to do. So to me at least, my interpretation of telling people what to do, if I could add a bit to that, perhaps maybe there's a conflict of interest when that telling what other people should do, it like the more coercive you are with telling what people should do, I feel like the bigger the conflict of interest is. So for example, if you say, hey, we should get the government to promote Bitcoin via DepEd or something like this, uh, I would say that's probably a conflict of interest because you will get rich through using coercion to get people to, I guess, learn about this stuff. Um, yeah, I guess it's one of those things,
That
yeah.
that makes sense. I mean, if Sailor was just saying, "I love my stock because it has gone up 50%," whatever, right? He doesn't tell you to buy it or anything. It's just like he's telling you why it's awesome. I don't. I mean, I'm not a lawyer, but it seems okay, right? So maybe that line that Steph's talking about is a pretty good, you know, line to draw.
I think the morality thing comes into play. Well, that's on this side of the fence. On the way on the morality thing comes into play. When the doomsday scenario comes that the world becomes like Venezuela, and all their family relatives and friends lose value of their money, and pork is like 1,000 pesos per kilo, and rice is like 200 pesos per kilo, and yours is the only currency that never devalued, and in fact maybe even gained because of the rush into it. Then all of a sudden you're the bad guy because you didn't save your family early enough before everything happened. But as I said in the first time, uh, the last left still with the normal fiat family and friends because they haven't seen this nor foresee this in the foreseeable future. At least when they see it, it's gonna be too late.
Well, I wish what you said is actually like realistic in real life, where you tell your family and friends and they actually listen to you. No,
So
none of my family and friends have listened to me when I promoted Bitcoin to them, so I'm not sure there's any conflict of interest there. Um, okay, does anybody else have an opinion on this? Okay, so to move on. I brought up an example, which is if Sailor used, or if we use, for example, DepEd, Department of Education, to promote Bitcoin to all Filipinos or promote Bitcoin to your nation or whatever. So on that note, he does give this. They had this discussion on dematerializing information, where the first wave of the internet had us dematerialize information in the form of Wikipedia, I guess Google, all of this information that we have on the internet right now, which used to be you'd have to publish this stuff on like physical things, and now you can basically access them through the cyber world, right? um and he gives this example, which is for universities. I guess this applies to high school as well, and as well as grade school. Is that learning on the internet is way more scalable, way more accessible, and way more efficient. And I guess it kind of juxtaposed against the current system, for example, with DepEd, where we have, you know, literally a school building on every block or every barangay. And to me, at least, based on what he's saying, that actually does feel a bit inefficient. And if you wanted to scale out information, especially very high quality information, you could actually do that right now through the internet. I know this is kind of a controversial idea, controversial topic. Do you think that the do you think DepEd and I guess public education still plays a role in like in society, or do you think it's archaic and the internet has basically given us alternatives that are much more efficient and much more, I guess, effective in teaching people, kids, and adults?
Um, I guess my answer is kind of safe. I think they still have a role to play in a sense that people aren't really aware of what's out there, right? So they're not gonna be like looking at Saylor.org and looking at all the free stuff. Um, and I think that if they were uh, really looking out for the interests of the students, then, or at least what I would do if I were them, let's put it that way, is that I would start to incorporate all the stuff you can get online, the MIT classes for computer science and whatever else is free out there. The stuff on Sailor.org, lots of free lessons, accounting, statistics, you name it, Bitcoin even. I'd start incorporating that. And I think over time, I I bet you the trend is going to continue where people will, except for fields where you need licenses, or except for fields where people expect licenses, like civil engineering, maybe medical doctor, people will care less and less about the school and more about like your passion and interest for what you do, and your experience in that field. And you'll get that by first starting out with like learning all these free stuff, learning using all these free classes online.
For me, if well, I guess it's funny if DepEd's gonna do a cryptocurrency like what uh, elective or seminar for kids. Is that how they're planning to do it?
No, no, no. It actually had nothing to do with cryptocurrency. It actually, I think, is in a more general sense, at least, this idea that information has dematerialized in the cyber world, and so we don't need to deliver it through the old means. We can actually deliver it through the new means, which is through the internet or through cyber or digitized information.
Well, um, well, schooling in institution it's made of cement, and it's a physical building where people can take shelter. Where I mean, from screens you can read, but you really can't draw on screens. You have to have a blackboard and chalk. So, but um, I guess the question more is the trend going to be more less and less relevance for public schooling in particular? And frankly, our public schooling is kind of contrived, diba? I mean, I mentioned the word truther a while ago. So just take this angle with a grain of salt, no? That our public schooling, at least in recent years or decades, is like it's nefariously contrived to make people like stupid. Diba? There are those weird errors in textbooks, like even innuendos in sentences. It's crazy, diba? And I've heard of an angle coming from the States, and I think it's not so far here. I mean, if you think that Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas is really just ng Pilipinas, or do they have a Viber group of central bankers in the world, and sort of like planning a strategy or of some sort, then the same can be said for DepEd. Like maybe they're aware of it, they're not aware of it. Maybe there's like levers here and there. Oh, don't put calculus in 10th grade, not yet. Put it in like third year college, don't make them smart. Or like international trade agreements for engineering and manufacturing be given to China or something, or Vietnam. Then Philippines nursing. We're gonna allocate 10,000 jobs for nurses here in New York, in Chicago, in LA, in Germany, just make more nurses. So there's a like a conspiracy angle there somehow. And in that sense, diba, when it's not really a fair game anymore, and children are just being plucked from being productive palay workers, farm workers, nurses, and security guards who retire early and cause a deficit in productivity, and they bend backwards, they succumb to disease earlier, lose property. That's like way far down the road. So in that sense, yeah, it's DepEd is not doing their job, but it'll take quite some time to bear. And if you plant your seeds right in this lifetime, you will see your grandchildren prosper better than your neighbors.
Yeah, I also want to add a little bit to what I said a while ago. Like, it's not going to change until the culture of employers change too, right? Because a lot of employers here will look at your education, they'll look at to see if you graduated at least in some school, at least high school level. But like, you've seen the likes of, I think, Apple, Google, Facebook, where they no longer require college degrees, at least for engineering, software engineering. I hope that continues, that the trend continues, so that people don't see formal schooling as a gateway to financial success, right? And what's really important are the skills, and yes, the connections. I agree, the connections are important too, but you can make that elsewhere. It doesn't have to be in the academic setting.
Anybody else want to react to what Ryan said? Um, yeah, so I like what you said, which is that it feels contrived. I've used a different word, and I got pretty violent reactions against it. The word I used was arbitrary. Sort of to mean like it's whatever someone at a desk sort of decides what the agenda should be, because the criticism I got for using the word arbitrary was, they said, no, it's not arbitrary, we have look at all our studies, and we have like international agenda that we're complying with or whatever. So, but at some point it is arbitrary in the sense that someone does come up with it. So contrived, perhaps. I'm not sure which of the two would get a more violent reaction, but this is a discussion that Michael Saylor and Lex Fridman actually do have. Uh, so it was on the discussion on whether government policy. Saylor says all government policy is both inflationary and inflammatory because it interferes with the free market. It prevents rational actors from providing goods and services cheaper. And there is a cost to every policy, a cost that's socialized to the public, and it's less efficient and more expensive. So this is basically, this is basic Austrian econ, libertarian, sort of fare, right? But Lex asked the question whether Michael Saylor thinks that what they're doing is malevolence. So, what Ryan was asking is, he was sort of, I guess, implying that he was implying that there is some kind of a malevolence, that there is some kind of conspiracy. And I actually liked Michael Saylor's answer. Is he says he sees it as incompetence, and that incompetence comes from a lack of humility. So he has his Clint Eastwood quote from a movie: "A man's got to know." Let me do an American accent. A man's got to know his limitations. And so basically, he says it's overconfidence, where bureaucrats underestimate the challenges and overestimate the outcome.
Yeah.
So that's what I had to say to that. Thanks to Michael Saylor, basically
I
quoting
like
him.
that answer.
I like that answer too.
Yeah.
Because
I'd also add that the bureaucrats will also be there like 4 to 6 years only too, right? So even if they do screw up, it's someone else's problem later.
Yeah. Well, we can add a lot to we can add a lot more to that discussion on why it's not exactly optimal, but yes.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and I did like that answer as well because typically when we criticize the government, criticize bureaucrats, we tend to latch onto the, I guess the malevolent side, right? When in fact it's kind of both, right? It exists in this. It exists. I don't want to say balance, and I do want to say I guess this is my own bias coming out, and I do want to say that there is a bias towards malevolence. But cognitively, I do believe cognitively they believe that it is good, right? And so it comes from a place of incompetence than malevolence, and it means that we don't need to label these people as evil, right? We can just say that they are misguided, which I think is a lot
Yeah.
more productive.
Yeah. I think I understand that bias, and it probably stems from the fact that we're in a country that's known to be corrupt, and we all know that too, right? So it becomes super easy to label the people that steal as evil. But, you know, I bet you, like, if we really got to know them, that they wouldn't, we would see that they wouldn't think what they're doing. Maybe a bit wrong, but not very wrong. Like, they justify it, right? Maybe for a good cause or whatever. Um, but yeah, I said that to say I think I know where that bias is coming from.
Yeah, so they justify it with a good cause, and this is
Yeah.
actually I want to bring up a example that Michael Saylor quotes, and he gives this. I didn't actually know this. It's a historical fact, which is that George Washington apparently died because he was bled to death by well-meaning physicians.
Yeah.
So they basically said, George Washington, this might look like it's bad for you, but actually it's good for you. But actually, it killed him. So
Yeah.
that is the case with most of what government does, and um, it's well-meaning, but unfortunately will harm the host. Okay, so I am down to anybody else has any opinion on this? All right, the last question. Or at least the last point of discussion. So this is on Twitter verification, and Michael Saylor proposes that instead of having a blue check mark, we should have an orange check mark where we each pay, not really pay, but more like post a security deposit for our. He gets quite creative. He says it's posting a security deposit for our safe passage through cyberspace. And the idea is that by having a deposit which has a monetary value, we're able to put a cost to the truth by having a consequence to, I guess, being untruthful. Um, did this spark any imagination in you? How do you see this could be useful? How else could you see this could be useful? In what novel ways do you think it could solve some of our problems when it comes to the internet?
Wait. Is this? Are you talking about the that idea he had where you would deposit some sats with Twitter
Yeah.
and then you'd get an orange check mark? And
Yeah.
then maybe Twitter will give you some options to say, "Hey, I only want to see messages from other orange check marks." Or you could leave it as is, right? And you see everything you see now, or
Or
only
only
allow
replies,
orange check. Yeah, only replies from
or
orange
only
check
follows,
marks.
something like this.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And
Yeah. I'll
then,
go. I'll talk later. I do have a bunch of things to say about that.
okay, well, I have nothing else really to say other than, uh, well, on face value, I think it does solve some problems. I do think that there should be some kind of friction, especially when you're on a, you know, when you're on a system that you're trying to form trust among one another. Uh, And I like this. I like how he describes it, where you're able to put a price on the truth. Whereas right now, it's basically
Yeah.
free to do it, right? So
Yeah. Yeah. I want to give it a bit of a background then first. So proof of work was invented by Adam Back, right? And he called it hash cash then, because he wanted a way. He wanted a way to solve spam, like email spam. But it, the options he had, like paying 1 cent every time you email, like that wasn't something that you could reasonably do then or even today, right? So he invented proof of work, where to send an email, your computer would need to guess a random number that when you hashed it, it would form a certain pattern, and that pattern could be accepted by whatever the recipient or something. I don't know the details there anymore. And so essentially you had to prove as a sender that you spent some energy and you attach that hash to the email to send it. And that's what Satoshi Nakamoto used to make Bitcoin, right? That among other things. And so it's really interesting now, like when you deposit sats, you're essentially like outsourcing your proof of work to Bitcoin. Right? And I think it goes full circle. I think that it you could solve like 99.9% of the spam out there. And I think it's an excellent way to do it while still keeping channels or communication channels with real people open that want to contact you for legitimate reasons, right? Like, hey, you're a Bitcoiner in the Philippines, come join this meetup here. We don't know each other, but I want to invite you. Would I be willing to pay 10 centavos to send something like that? Yeah, you bet. Right? So it is something like that where there is a cost to sending messages, or at least in Saylor's case, there's a cost to being a spammer. There is this site like Vida, I think. Let me get the link. I'll paste it when I'm done talking, when I have my two hands. That attempts to do this on like an API level, where I could put up my contact information on Vida, and people will I put a rate as well. Like, hey, if you want to call me, or per minute or something like that. I don't know the exact details, but if you want to do any of these, you have to pay. You have to pay me to do so. So maybe, Jack Dorsey wants a page, but he'll say, yeah, I want $200 if you want to send me a text message, right? Because a lot of people probably do. But if it's me, it'll be like, yeah, whatever, 1 peso, just enough to keep the spammers away. That's an interesting, that's a similar approach to the orange checkmark that Saylor is proposing.
Another analogy I thought of was although doesn't exist in the Philippines, but I've seen it in first world countries, where if you want to make use of their grocery pushing cart, you have to deposit something like €5 coin into a slot, which allows you to eject the push cart. And the idea of that is, when you go back to your car, they want you to return the push cart back in the store and not leave it out in a parking lot. And the way they do that is, through this whole deposit thing. And so for you to get your money back, you have to bring the push cart back to the store. So it's kind of the same thing, because what you were describing was you need to pay. So you said you need to pay 10 centavos or whatever to prevent spam. But what Michael Saylor was describing was, it's simply a deposit. So you're only paying to, I guess, gain access or be considered.
Yeah.
and after you've gone through, after you're verified or whatever, then the idea is you do get your money back in a way. You do get your deposit back, and it's only taken from you if you're marked as a spammer.
Yeah.
So it's not like you're gonna go poor in this anti-spam world trying to prove you're not a spammer.
Right. I mean, you know, the stuff we're talking about, like especially on Twitter, like even if you deposit, he was saying $20 worth of Bitcoin. But hey, let's just say it's $5 or less,
Or less.
right? And it's also optional. So you know, it shouldn't degrade people's experience of Twitter. It should just make Twitter much better for the ones that opt to go and use this feature, and they can turn it off anytime they want and get their money back as well. And you know, small amounts like that doesn't make sense to charge with a credit card. So I think Lightning is great for that.
Yeah, we're back on the credit card thing. Oh, there was something that I wanted to point out. Well, I was surprised to hear it, and I guess like it didn't occur to me right away. It hasn't occurred to me before, and it's surprising it hasn't. He said that at 2.5%, after 40 transactions, your money is basically gone. And I was like, oh my god, he's right. Like you just transfer your money 40 times, and after that, the credit card company has taken everything. So 40 transactions isn't a lot of transactions, and yet
Yeah.
it's all gone. Anyway, yeah, that's my last question, because everything else we've kind of I mean, it's the usual inflation, Keynesian stuff.
Well, I just wanted to add to the last question.
Yeah, please.
So the only thought I have about solving the problem of spammers,
Mhm.
or let's say trolls for that matter, diba? I think it's humans know how to thrive in chaos. That's the first thing I'm gonna say. Like for example, take the last two elections, or like the last elections where there was just the f- like the pioneering use of trolls really just swept the public's consciousness off their feet, and they're like it's like the easiest sale, diba? And the trolls got what they wanted, diba? But now I feel like the at least for me, it's like the public, even the titas know what trolls mean, and they've caught on, and their consciousness has immediately upgraded, and now they're somewhat immune to trolling. Although the the people on the other end who control the trolls, they're also upping their game and seeing what parts of the public's consciousness they can play around with to convince them to do this, to force them into a decision again in whatever arena it may be. But I would still defend the idea that humans know how to thrive in chaos. And if you take the Filipino poor, for example, they by default they discuss never they would put their hand with transaction fees, even though they could for cash. To this day, they still rely on one shop. But aside from those small things, they do know to thrive in chaos. And only theory, if there's such a system that is said to be solving 99% of the problems, can this system still be audited later on? And how can, because essentially what you're gonna have is a population who are gonna believe that, oh, it's already, the system is 99% working or perfect or ideal, and there's no reason to keep doubting it until someone is able to circumvent that system and use it for like bad things. Like when you get a very credulous population, that's like the jackpot in the lotto.
Just to clarify so you're asking a question, right? Just to clarify your question, um, you're asking whether 99% trust in the system is that the Bitcoin system, or is that like, sort of traditional society systems?
I guess the point you were making about like the check marks, diba? It's gonna be based on an indelible ledger, diba? Is that right? So it's supposed to be trustworthy. No.
No, 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 not necessarily. It just puts a cost to being a spammer, right?
All right.
And I say spammer because you can be a troll. Like that system won't. I don't think it will deter trolls from being trolly, because
Mm-hmm.
hey, if they make, I don't know how much they say they make here, like 200,000 pesos a month. What's a $20 deposit, right? For
Mm-hmm.
whoever troll farm employer there is. So it's nothing. They're gonna be there. This is really more to prevent machine
Spam.
spam.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Machine spam. Because what they do is they just have these scripts running that make accounts, that copy profile pictures and names, and the profile names, and just change one letter, and then everything is automated. They follow the followers of that person. Then they start messaging them like, "Hey, how's your trade going?" It's stuff like that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay, okay. Yeah, I was just like maybe just letting my imagination run for a bit. Pero I guess I don't know. I have nothing to say about that for now. I guess.
Yeah, but I did like what you said or pointed out, which is that the Philippines is a good example of how people are able to thrive in the chaos. I
Yeah.
do I do view like I do view the chaos, say, thrive in the chaos. I do view the chaos to mean the chaos that governments introduce when they, have policies and, kind of these, I guess, nation building type stuff or whatever. And
Mm,
Filipinos, and when those things are not able to address certain issues, or they're not able to, create the proper like um rails for how people can organize, Filipinos are able to organize around that.
yeah.
Our informal economy, for example, is a great example of that, where we are actually able to create markets, transact with one another, even if there aren't the typical, like, I guess, institutional infrastructure or rails that you would think
Influence or guidance.
is what we need, but we actually don't need those things. We can function perfectly fine without it.
Yeah. Like how India has a 2% tax base, if that's still true. Diba?
I don't know about that.
2% of the
India.
only 2% of the population in India pay tax.
Wow.
And it works. It works.
Well, that's hard to believe, but that's incredible. Mm.
Yeah.
Okay. Um. Yeah, like I said, that's actually my last question. There's one more thing, although I'm not sure if this really counts as a question. Analog versus digital. It's, when we go from analog to digital is obviously way better. It's not just a little bit better, it's way better. And he kind of describes what is the vision for DeFi, right? Decentralized finance. Right now, DeFi is offered on other blockchains such as Ethereum and its competitors. But he imagines DeFi will be offered by centralized apps. He describes, think the Citadels of the world, the high speed traders of the world, Binance, FTX. It's these exchanges that will provide liquidity and the loan structure that will allow for, I guess, decentralized financial markets to appear. The reason for that is because it's a it's a compliance issue and also an efficiency issue. Um, and so the question is, in that case, aren't we just replicating the same problem that we've had that emerged from the old financial system, are we just doing the same thing again in this new Bitcoin financial system? Okay, I guess that is a good question. So again, okay.
Yeah, I am not sure because I think there's still going to be a lot of people who want to do transact, exchange assets or whatever, use some DEX, which is decentralized exchange, so that no one knows that they're doing it and they wouldn't have to think about capital gains or triggering some tax event. I think that is still a huge percentage of the users. And if they do it in a CEX or a centralized exchange, then you're gonna be worrying about that, right? Like if you do on Coinbase, they're gonna be reporting you to IRS. If you're doing it on Binance, maybe not, but that information's gonna be with Binance, and 10, 20 years later, you know, they might be strong armed to report all these trading activities.
Yeah, but what if the centralized exchange is offshore and it's not, it's like it's based in Hong Kong or Singapore or Cayman
Yeah,
Islands or something like
like the way Tether was based is offshore, but the U.S. Attorney General got to them somehow. Still, you know, the U.S. is pretty powerful, right? But what I think, what I can definitely imagine though, is that some of these exchanges, maybe not directly, but at least indirectly, will be participating, or might be, yeah, will be participating in like a, I'll just call it a DEX, something like a DEX. Because what I'm thinking of is let's say there are tokens on Lightning Network already using something like RGB or Taro.
tokens.
And
So
anyone like USDT, or
Okay.
you can start issuing tokens on Lightning. Then anyone, essentially any node, can be a an FX, a forex exchange, right? So then if I want to exchange a token, let's say from Bitcoin to USDT, then I could really just choose the cheapest node, and a node might be run by you, or a node might be run by Binance or um, Coinbase. But I also don't care who it is, because that exchange is done atomically, meaning kaliwaan siya, right? There's no way for me to pay you and then you just run away with it. Like there are assurances in that trade where if I pay you, then I get these tokens back or something like that. Um, so I think that that's gonna be a a I can imagine that that's gonna happen on Lightning, and that these centralized exchanges will be at least indirectly lending liquidity there. Not lending; they will be adding liquidity to that, and uh, you might have some form of DeFi there, but you in a sense, for the ones that don't want to think about tax, they'll have best of both worlds, right? They'll have the liquidity of the centralized exchanges, but there's also no trust required.
Yeah, you brought up how Tether was, even if it's offshore, they still got to Tether. And I feel the same way about a lot of these, especially a lot of these decentralized smart contract platforms. The saying, decentralized in name only. And it makes me wonder whether the government could go after decentralized exchanges and shut them down. If they could go after, I mean, we know, for example, USDC, right, which also powers DeFi. Ethereum itself, right, like especially post merge, now has censorship built into it. So it's starting to look like DeFi isn't even really DeFi, and that I don't know. It's yet to
Yeah,
play out, right?
I think, and I didn't look at a lot of it. there's certainly some things that are interesting, like Uniswap, and can they shut it down? No,
Mm.
I don't think like the US can reasonably shut it down, but they could certainly throw like a a monkey wrench in it, the same way they did with Tornado Cash, right? You've heard about that, where they started blacklisting addresses. I mean, a part of it is also the way that Ethereum is designed, where you have like smart contracts have like one address, which freaking sucks because you can see pretty much everything that goes in and out of that contract, right? You can see all these transactions. Like unlike Bitcoin, you generate essentially like, I'll just call it address. It's like you generate a new address every time you receive, and when you spend, it's like it's not even clear that it's uh that this one address is yours. It's just the way that Bitcoin was designed. And so like when these things are gonna be implemented in Bitcoin, especially on Lightning, it's gonna be a lot harder to trace where like there's no smart contract, right? There's no notion of one smart contract on Bitcoin. Like it's not the way it's designed. And so I think it's going to be more difficult, and I hope that because of that, it will make it harder for things like the Tornado Cash blacklisting to happen.
In other words, what you're saying is, if I understood it correctly, DeFi on Bitcoin will be better than DeFi on Ethereum.
I don't know. I certainly hope so, but also like what's DeFi? Like you said,
Yeah.
I mean, it's super vague.
Yeah.
Like there's some things that are put under DeFi, but you know, so are those Ponzi schemes, right? Like, is that DeFi? I mean, yeah, so I don't know. I mean, we'll see. I think if there's some form of quote unquote DeFi on Ethereum, on Bitcoin, it should be called something else so it isn't confusing. But I'm still confused as to what DeFi is.
Yeah, maybe unregulated finance. I don't
Well,
know.
I mean, yeah, like, so is like if I lend you money, right? Or if,
Yeah.
or vice versa. Like that's unregulated, and that's kind of like finance too. And um, yeah, I don't know. It's hazy.
Right. So, at least the ability to trade tokens would probably be done better on. And when I say ability to trade tokens, it means like, having the liquidity, having the um it being permissionless would probably be better on Bitcoin because, like you said, is it privacy? Um, is it
Yeah,
the settlement that's
I
final?
it really well no, because like when you use Uniswap, right? Uniswap is a decentralized exchange, and I think that falls under DeFi. It's interesting because people can like essentially trade, like put parang pairs on it, right? Um, but like my reasons for being bullish on tokens on Lightning isn't because like I think Uniswap sucks. No, I think Uniswap's quite interesting. It's just that like it's on chain, right? It's on chain, so essentially you broadcast it to all the nodes. It's not scalable when the Bitcoin, when the Ethereum network is busy. It's gonna be really expensive to use Uniswap, and that's why all these tokens, like when they get big and rich enough, they have their own side chain and their own token, and it gets so confusing, right? I do that is probably isn't gonna happen with Lightning. Like these exchanges are gonna be peer to peer, and they, in a sense, they're gonna be more decentralized, and they're still gonna be trustless, and you're gonna have the liquidity of the Lightning network behind it as well, right? And I understand that what I'm saying sounds vague if you don't know much about like how these tokens work, or how
How they're traded.
how they're traded on Lightning. Because one, they're also not out in production yet. Um, but conceptually, like to me at least, it sounds a lot more scalable.
Yeah, that's actually we were talking about this, although it was in chat, about like stable coins, especially like non-US dollar stable coins. So I do see those, like, like peso stable coins, or basically non-US dollar stable coins. I do see them as like tokens, and them being traded, for example, on Lightning Network. It would be a great use case, because you do want, like you said, you do want people who think in terms of pesos to be able to pay their debts, pay for their goods in pesos, and receive them in pesos also.
Yeah. Yeah. And you don't want to be like if there's a 1 month period of high gas fees on ETH, like suddenly your wallet with a peso balance and a ETH balance costs you more to to send out, like, than your cup of coffee you're buying, right? Like, it's not gonna work. So that's why I think Lightning is gonna be excellent for this. And if they're like, when stable coins come, or tokens for that matter, on Lightning, and then we have a peso stable coin, then we should be able to see wallets that are self-custodial, where you can have a peso balance and you actually have the keys to those peso tokens, right, on your wallet. Yeah, you'll still have to trust the issuer. There's no way around it. But that wallet can be open source. And suddenly, anyone with an internet connection can have a peso balance and a Bitcoin balance on a wallet and transact there. And any company that accepts Lightning can accept payments from those wallets. And all Cash App users can remit money to these people. So I think that's an awesome future to have.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Very, very cool. Yeah, so just to close out, and I guess to tie it back to Bitcoin and what Saylor said, he says, so just to the original question, right? Are we just replicating the same thing again? Is it just are we just centralizing again? And he says no. And the difference is that this time around, any company in the world can plug into the Bitcoin network. And basically, these companies, no matter where they are, they'll be competing with one another, right? In a way that, unlike before, it's only a few small companies based in America, based in Switzerland, based in London, that are able to, get that trust needed, to create these, to function in this, I guess, create the environment that's necessary for these transactions to happen. And he points out that the benefits of development that happens on the network, no matter where it happens in the world, benefits everybody on the network, no matter where they are in the world. So you said earlier that anybody can create a permissionless app that can, accept Philippine peso derivatives, trade it with US dollar derivatives, trade it with Bitcoin and other currencies. Anybody can do that, and anybody can grow in that. Companies will adopt that and build products on top of it. all of that to say is this development is happening everywhere in the world on their own, and yet everybody on the network is benefiting equally, so to say.
Absolutely.
There's your conflict of interest. It should be like, it shouldn't be conflict of interest. It should be like unity of interest or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's true. It's like, I mean, let's take his example. There are companies out there that will take your USDC and give you 7.5% per annum on it. Right? And that's freaking awesome. Yeah, there is custody risk. But like, so suddenly now you're competing, these people are competing with their local banks that can take your dollars. Right? And no way are they paying anything close to 7.5% per annum. So you're going to see more and more of that. And when you like his analogy or his example, I think will also extend, to many levels, and just like that Lightning Network one I gave a while ago, where Binance can add a node and they'll say, hey, we support 300 tokens you can swap with Bitcoin and trade with us over Lightning. But others can add those too, and these others don't have to be even companies. You don't have to trust them at all. You just, if they have a better rate, go ahead and trade with them. So that's gonna bring the price down.
Yeah, because for those who aren't aware, the rate that you're talking about is not provided because you give up custody. You are simply providing liquidity, and so you don't need to trust anybody else. Nobody is taking the money from you and lending it to other people. You're just providing liquidity and being rewarded to provide liquidity, but you still have full control over your money. So it's totally different from depositing your money in a bank, for example.
Yeah.
And that's what you mean by you don't need to trust companies,
because it's like they like token exchange on Lightning is gonna be kaliwaan, right? It's as I hand it to you, you hand the other side to me.
All right, guys. Great session. I had a lot of fun. We haven't decided yet on, well, we haven't even opened it up. So I'm opening it up. Basically, the next podcast discussion is open to suggestions. If there's any particular podcast that you want to discuss, please suggest it. I do have some suggestions, which would be maybe Jeff Booth, or maybe Greg Foss, maybe somebody younger. But in any case, please post your suggestions in intros and chat. Lynn Alden, okay. So some macro stuff. So, yeah.
Well, she has one on Lightning Network. She has a
Okay.
long article which I'm not done reading yet, and she talks a little bit about that on McCormack's Peter's
What Bitcoin did.
podcast, what Bitcoin did. But obviously she couldn't cover it all. It's an hour. I mean, that article she wrote is an hour and a half long, right? But she talks about the Lightning Network and what it's replacing essentially, and she touches on banks and how they transfer money. So Steph, your question in chat is related to that, like who gets the fees. So she talks a little bit about that. But I don't know. I mean, obviously I'm interested, but it starts to get technical, even with the banks. Not necessarily technical with Lightning, but like how banks work.
Yeah. So yeah, just share that. If nobody else gives any suggestion, then it will go in by default.
Well, what were yours? Why don't you post them?
No, mine. Well, I already picked the last two, so I don't want to hog all the suggestions. So my suggestion was just Jeff Booth. If not, then Greg Foss. I mean,
So we might be talking about credit default swaps.
default swaps. I don't know about the Greg Foss, but I mean, I don't know about I don't know about Craig Foss, but Jeff Booth might be interesting. Sort of futuristic um, discussions. I think more on that spectrum. Yeah.
Sure. Which episode or which podcast do you
Oh
think is
man, I've listened to a few already. So like I'll like I've listened to a few already, and that's the thing, right? Like I'm looking. Well, I'm not sure there's one that's like okay, this is good, solid, like solid length one because I do know of one which is like 8 hours long with Breedlove.
Oh my god.
Oh my god. It's
Wow.
like several sessions, so probably not that practical.
Oo.
Yeah,
O sige, I guess we could decide offline.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But yeah. Anyway, thanks for coming, guys. Hope you guys have a good rest of the week. Thanks for
Thank
coming.
you. Good night.
Bye. Good night.